Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports with another football video, and today I'm going over my Week 3 power rankings for the 2023 NFL season. I apologize if the audio is a little echoey. This was the only place that I could do this for this week, so let's get right into it. First off, we have the perennial dumpster fire. We have the Bears at 32, the Cardinals at 31, the Texans at 30, and the Broncos at 29. I think that all of these teams have been consistently the worst teams in the league through 2 weeks. The Bears have lost; they're all 0-2. The Broncos have played the best, and they've also played some somewhat difficult teams, but they just blew a 18-point lead over Washington, and being outscored 32-3 over the course of a half of a game. Just that deserves dumpster fire material. Same thing with the Cardinals; they just blew a massive lead against the Giants. The Giants had been outscored 57-0 at starting off the season, and then the Cardinals just blew a massive lead against the Giants. The Texans have looked okay. Their rookie quarterback has been fairly decent. He had almost 400 yards this week. And Nico Collins is coming on really strong like he did at the end of last year. But they need a lot of work before they can start being a good team. And the Bears have just been really bad. They got demolished by the Packers last week. And then this week, I didn't even see any of the game, but they just got killed by Tampa, who's obviously they're 2-0, but they're not that great of a team. So the Bears just have been the worst both weeks. And dumpster fire. Moving on, we have could be mid. We have the Panthers, the Raiders, and the Steelers. The Panthers are 0-1, and so are the Steelers. They're both going to be playing tomorrow. The Panthers' Week 1 game was very underwhelming against the Falcons. They lost by 2 or 3 scores. So even if they win tomorrow against the Saints, I don't expect them to move up much. They might move above the Raiders and Steelers. Again, and with the Steelers, if they beat the Browns, then they'd move up significantly. But I just don't know if that's going to happen. The Raiders are 1-1, but their game against the Bills this week was horrendous. They just got demolished. They looked pretty okay Week 1 against the Broncos, but the Broncos are not a great team. So the Raiders are at 27 after getting demolished by the Bills. They're the lowest 1-1 team, but they really just looked that bad this week. And even the Week 1 game against the Broncos didn't look that great. Next up at 25, we have Y. This is the New England Patriots. I am obviously a Patriots fan, and I don't really know if I need an explanation here. I'm just kind of done with everything. We can demolish bad teams, and then we lose on some fluke play at the end of the game against good teams. Against Miami this week, there's a couple different things. There's penalties on offense, obviously, but then on the last drive, we had a really interesting play. We ended up lateraling it to one of our offensive linemen, and we were short. But they gave us the first down, but they overturned it, even though I don't believe there was enough evidence to overturn it. But anyways, I think that was a bad call. But every single game we get play against a good team. Eagles last week, we didn't get 2 feet down. Last week and this week, we were inches away from either continuing the game and having a chance to have a game-winning drive, and every time something happens that makes it not work out. Moving on, we have beat the dumpster fire. We have the Colts, the Commanders, the Buccaneers, and the Packers. All of these teams have just demolished the dumpster fire. The Packers beat the Bears. The Bucs beat the Bears and Arizona. Washington beat the Broncos, and the Colts beat the Texans. These teams are just beating the dumpster fire, and it's there's not really much to be said. I don't know much about any of these teams. The Colts, they've all looked good. But they haven't played anyone that strong. And the Colts and the Packers both lost in their games against competitive teams. The Chargers beat the Colts, and the Packers lost to the Falcons. So none of these teams have played a challenging team yet, and the two teams that have, they both lost. They've all looked promising. They all have young quarterbacks that all look really decent. But I need to see them play a challenging team and win before I put them any higher than this. Moving on, we have they're confused. We have the Giants, the Bengals, the Jets, and the Vikings. The Giants could have been in the previous category because they also have only beaten the dumpster fire. But I have them at 20, slightly above because they were good last year. And in the second half of the game this week, they looked like the team that played last year. Daniel Jones had almost 400 yards between rushing and passing. The Giants' offense looked like it was really clicking against the Cardinals. And although they got demolished week 1 against the Cowboys, I don't put a lot of stock into week 1. I actually brought them down a few spots from last week because last week I still had them fairly high, expecting them to blow out the Cardinals. They did not, so I dropped them down because they did not meet my expectations of beating the Cardinals. But they were still a good team last year. They still look like they're promising this year, and next week will be a big test for them. The Bengals and the Vikings are both 0-2. They've both played two strong teams. The Bengals played the Ravens and the Browns, and the Vikings have played the Eagles and whatever team they played last week. But they're both 0-2, and they've both looked solid. The Dolphins, sorry. And they both looked solid in both of their games, except the Bengals didn't look solid last week. That's why they're a little bit lower. But yeah, those two teams could take the next step. They could be top half teams, but right now they're not playing great. And then the Jets, obviously they lost Aaron Rodgers. I'm not going to be saying the Jets are the best team in the league without Aaron Rodgers. Zach Wilson played horrendously this week, and last week he didn't even play that great, but they beat the Bills because Josh Allen played worse. I can see the Jets potentially being a decent team this year with Zach Wilson because they were 7-3 last year before they had injury issues. But this week was a really bad game, and both the Jets and the Giants just got beat down by the Cowboys. So I need to see a little bit more from all of these teams before putting them any higher than they are. But I think that this is a pretty fair spot for all of them as they're trying, like just below half, as they're trying to get back into the rhythm they're in last year. Moving on, this is interesting. We have the Titans, we have the Saints, we have the Chargers, we have the Browns, and we have the Falcons. I think that these are the five most interesting teams in the league right now. Tennessee beat the Chargers this week after losing to the Saints last week. The Saints beat the Titans last week in a close game. They play the Panthers tomorrow. The Chargers lost 2 weeks in a row to the Titans and to the Dolphins. I think that with the Chargers, it's hard to put them low because you know that they're going to be decent. And they played well in both of their games. Like, they played well against Tennessee, they played well against Miami. It's just little tiny things. And it's the same thing with the Patriots, but the Chargers are going to be better than the Patriots are. So I'm having a hard time putting the Chargers lower than 14 because they've played well in both of their games. You could say the same thing about the Vikings and the Bengals. I don't know, there's just something about the Chargers where I just can't I got to keep them at 14. The Browns obviously played a great game against the Bengals last week. They will play tomorrow. I don't really see them or the Saints moving a whole lot. If the Browns win, they'll go above the Falcons, but I don't see them going into the top 11. And then with the Saints, if the Saints beat the Panthers, big whoop. I might put them above the Chargers out of respect. But I don't see any of those two teams changing much. And then the Falcons are 2-0 after their win this week against the Packers, and it was a good win. They stopped the Packers from their comeback drive at the end. They had a pretty decent deficit to come back from, and they were able to score twice in a row and win the game, and it was a very solid game by all players. And Desmond Ridder played very well. Atlanta looked like a solid playoff team this week. And the Packers looked good last week against the Bears. They looked really good, and the Falcons really put it together. They put it together last week, but this week was a more impressive win for them, and it just looked like a good game of football. Tennessee is my biggest question mark here, simply because they beat the Chargers this week, but it was a very close game, and they still look a little confused. Last week they looked very confused. This week they look slightly less confused, and that's not necessarily the best assessment in the world. That's not really the assessment that you want, is that you looked confused last week against the Saints, and then you looked more confused this week when you win. But I think 16 is a fair spot for them moving forward. Next, we have the strong contenders. We have the Jaguars at 11. We have the Lions at 10, the Seahawks at 9, and the Rams at 8. Yes, the Rams are at 8. I'm probably going to regret that next week, but I'm putting them at 8 for now. The Rams are 2-0. They're 1-1, sorry. They beat Seattle this week, and then they won a close game against the Niners this week. And they look good. They look legitimately good. And so it's hard for me to make these power rankings week 3 because there's some teams where I'm favoring this season more than last season, and there's some teams I'm favoring last season more than this season. The Rams, I had no idea what to expect going into the season. I thought there was a chance they could be 9-7, and then Cooper Kupp went on IR. Now they look like they could be 9-7 again, or 10-7 again. And they just had a very strong game against the 49ers, who just demolished the Steelers last week. Their offense looks good. Their defense looks like it can make some stops. And the Rams look like they have a lot of young talent that's really decent. They beat Seattle last week. They destroyed Seattle last week. And then Seattle beat the Lions this week. So I ordered those 3 teams by the Rams beat Seattle, Seattle beat the Lions. And then I have the Jaguars at 11 after losing to the Chiefs this week. Mostly just because their offense looked horrendous. They would be higher if they would be number 8 right now if they didn't look horrendous against the Chiefs. If they looked okay against the Chiefs, I would have had them higher. But they just looked horrendous. Now, that could be a tribute to the Chiefs' defense. It could just be the Chiefs' defense played phenomenally well. But it's just the Jaguars just played so bad. They couldn't finish any drives. They ended with 9 points. It was just an overall bad game for them. And obviously they could do better next week, but they didn't even play that great against the Colts. They let up a lot of points against the Colts, and I didn't think the Colts would be a great team either. So Jacksonville, not the best start to the season, but they're 1-1, and their only loss is to Kansas City, so it's pretty fair. Moving on, we have the AFC Elite. We have the Ravens at 7, the Bills at 6, the Dolphins at 5, and Kansas City at 4. I said that I'd keep Kansas City at 4 if they won with both Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. They got Kelce and Chris Jones back, and they won. Kelce got a touchdown. Chris Jones played phenomenally, and their defense stepped it up with him back. I almost put the Chiefs in the top 3 just because Kelce and Jones were back, but again, their offense was a little iffy as well. They didn't score as much as I expected them to, and although the Jaguars played bad, it was a close game. So I'm keeping the Chiefs at 4 for now, although I do still think that they're a top team in the league. Dolphins are at 5. They're 2-0. They beat 0-2 teams, but they're decent teams. They beat the Patriots and the Chargers. Their offense looks fairly unstoppable. Not entirely unstoppable because they were stopped quite a bit today. But their offense looks like it's clicking. It looks very consistent. And I think that Miami is going to be one of the better teams in the league this year. I had them at 2 at some point last year, I think, in my power rankings before Tua got injured. But I think that 5 is a fair ranking for them right now. Their defense looked a lot better this week than last week. And if they can put another game together next week where they have a strong defense and a strong offense, then I can see them potentially moving up further. But yeah. Bills are at 4 and the Ravens are at Bills are at 6 and the Ravens are at 7. Both of these teams won this week. The Ravens beat the Bengals, a divisional game. It was a little too close for comfort at the end there, but ultimately they had a very strong defensive performance in the first half, and Lamar had a bounce-back game from last week. And Josh Allen obviously had a bounce-back game as well. They demolished the Raiders. Wasn't even close. They scored 5 touchdowns. And, yeah. Last but certainly not least, we have the NFL's Elite. We have the Niners at 1, the Cowboys at 2, and the Eagles at 3. A lot of Cowboys fans are going to be mad that after outscoring their opponents, 70-10, I don't have the Cowboys at 1. But I had the Niners at 1 last week, and then they won this week against the Rams team, so I'm going to keep them at 1. The Cowboys have played a Jets team without a quarterback and a just completely confused Giants team. They're very, very, very amazing wins, but I just think that the 49ers team is built for more long-term success, and everyone would agree that these are the 2 best teams in the league right now. I don't think there's very many people that would argue that any team has played better than the 49ers or the Cowboys so far this season. I just prefer the 49ers style of football. That's why I have the 49ers higher. But it really is dependent on which style of football you prefer and which team you think is slightly better than the other. The Eagles are at 3. They won this week against the Vikings. It was a tight game. It was a high-scoring game. Their offense was clicking on all cylinders. Last week, I didn't think it was. Last week, they were very inefficient against the Patriots. But this week, they were clicking on all cylinders. They played very good football. And they dropped down from 2 to 3 in a win, but that's just because the Cowboys have been dominant. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Again, sorry for the echo, but this was the only place that I could do this. So, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.